There's a part of me that doesn't care who's in charge. It doesn't care about titles. It doesn't care about hierarchies. And it doesn't care how confident someone sounds. What it cares about is whether things add up. Because I learned from a very young age that power and truth are not the same thing. I grew up in a house with clear authority. My dad was born in 1925. Old school values. Men provide, men lead, men discipline. The rules were clear. The consequences were clear. And I loved him and felt safe because of that level of certainty. But sometimes the rules didn't make sense. Do as I say, not as I do, he'd say. And that was the moment something woke up inside of me. Because when words and behaviour don't match, my nervous system feels it. I'm not talking philosophically. I physically feel it. And it feels wrong. The truth teller isn't about being right. It's about being coherent. And when I was younger, I used it as a weapon. I used it to dominate and to cut when I felt hurt. But over time, I realized something. Truth, without regulation, destroys more than it fixes. Now, when that part activates in me, it's not trying to win. It's trying to clarify. It's the part of me that says, something's off here. Not to shame and not to attack, but to make things make sense, to make things coherent. And that's what this episode is really about. When I was 6 years old, in grade 1, my dad had a rule. You never throw the first punch, but you make sure you throw the last. To me, that made sense. That was fair. So when David Clark, who was bigger than me, punched me, I hit him back. Hard. He cried. And I got in trouble. It was lunchtime, and Mrs. Laurie told me to go and sit in the portable and to stay there until I'd spoken to Mrs. Westlake. So there I was, 6 years old, sitting alone in a portable, when I started looking out the window and I could see some friends of mine. They came over and asked, "What are you doing in there?" I said, "I can't leave." That's when they told me Mrs. Laurie had gone. So I walked out. And when she came around the corner and saw me playing and said, "David, have you spoken to Mrs. Westlake?" I lied. I said yes. And she walked away. And even though I'd gotten away with it, I did not feel good. It felt wrong. I had followed Dad's rules and been punished anyway. And now I'd broken another one. Honesty. So I walked back to the portable by myself and I sat there. Later, when Mrs. Westlake, this steady, warm energy that I'd always adored, came in, I burst into tears and I told her everything. I remember going home that day and saying to Dad, "Thanks. I followed your rule and I still got punished." And that was confusing because I loved him and I trusted him, but something didn't add up. That was the first time that I felt it, that internal friction when rules and outcomes don't align, when authority and fairness don't match, and when I go against my own integrity, my body, it won't let me sit comfortably in it. That portable classroom wasn't about a punch. It was about coherence. That 6-year-old in the portable didn't disappear. He just grew up. And in early high school, I learned something important. The older boys didn't just physically dominate. They dominated verbally. They'd pick at your insecurities. They'd find that soft spot and they'd yell it out so everybody could hear. And if you reacted, you lost. I'd already been bullied in primary school for wearing uniform when it wasn't compulsory, for having a much older dad, and for having a mother whose laugh resembled a kookaburra, apparently. I learned early what it felt like to be exposed. And one day, it clicked. Hang on a second. Hang on. This is a tool. If they can use words to dominate me, I can use words too. And I was good at it because I could see where people were incoherent. I could see what they were trying to hide. And so when I felt small, I'd attack. Loud, public, and precise. If you were insecure about your weight, I'm going after that. If you're pretending to be tough, I'm going to expose that. And if you are a stupid loudmouth, then I'm going to dismantle you. I wasn't stabilizing anything. I was just trying to win. And the crazy part, I almost never got punched. Well, once. Because even then, I understood something about power. There are lines, and I knew how far I could push. But underneath it all, I was hurting, depressed, insecure, trying to reconcile who I thought I was supposed to be with who I actually felt like. The truth teller had become a sword, and I justified it. Because if I was hurt, you were going to feel it too. I carried that sword into adulthood, into relationships, into bands, into community. And for a long time, I told myself, I'm just telling the truth. But truth without regulation doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like attack. And the truth is, I destroyed relationships. There's a friend that I love deeply, Tusker. We were opposites in almost every single way. Politics, emotion, how we saw the world. And I love that. We didn't agree, but we respected each other. And I thought we'd be friends for life. But over time, things changed. By the time I wasn't invited to the Bucks party, I knew something was coming to an end. Not because of one explosive moment, but because there was a pattern. Conflict, tension, history. And to be fair, some of that history was mine. The way I'd been, the way I'd reacted, the way I'd treated people before I changed. And that was part of why I'd changed. When we spoke about the wedding, he said I could come, but I had to behave, I had to stay away from certain people and not cause issues. And I understood that. It was his day. I respected that. But I felt it because I wasn't being invited as I was. I was being managed, and that hurt in a different way because by then I'd done the work to ensure I wouldn't react that way. But our friendship had kept me frozen in an older version of myself, a version I wasn't living in anymore. And that was heartbreaking because after losing Dad, I thought this person was going to be in my life forever. And now I was standing outside of something I once belonged in. That moment showed me something painful. Even when you change, not everybody comes close enough to see it. And that hurt because the truth teller had already cost me so much. And now I was looking at what happens when people only know the version of you that hurt them. And that's the thing about truth. Eventually, if you're brutally honest, you stop pointing it outwards and you start pointing it in. And no psychologist taught me that. No self-help book gave me the answer. I sat down with myself and I had to be honest, brutally honest. I had to use the truth teller on myself. I looked at the damage, I looked at the patterns, I looked at all the people I'd lost. And I realized something simple. If I didn't learn how to interrupt this part, I was going to keep destroying everything I loved. And that's what started to change everything. Not by silencing the truth teller, not by pretending it wasn't there, but by realizing it couldn't take to the stage by itself. It needed something above it, something that could step in when emotion arrives fast. But I'll unpack that later. You'll meet the circuit breaker in episode 8. The truth teller, it didn't disappear, it just evolved. That agitation, it still comes. That signal, that internal friction when something doesn't add up, I still feel it physically, and it rises fast. The difference now, I don't unleash it. Where the old version would fire up immediately, loud and sharp, the new version slows down, takes a breath. Now there's a pause. Instead of attacking incoherence, I get curious. I send the explorer. I say, go gather more data. I send the scientist. I say, check the logic on this. And then the director steps in and decides. Sometimes the truth teller speaks softly. Sometimes it asks a question rather than making a statement. Help me understand this. And sometimes it stays silent. And yes, it still wants to come out swinging. That part of me hasn't vanished. It's just not allowed to run the show. The director leads it. Before, it tried to win. Now, it tries to understand. Before, it reacted. Now, it clarifies. And when it speaks today, it's not trying to expose anyone. It's trying to notice when something doesn't add up, when words and actions don't align, when something feels off. That's what it was built for. It's a safety mechanism. My job isn't to be perfect. My job is to identify incoherence. That's leadership. Everyone has a truth teller. It may not be loud or verbal, but somewhere inside of you, there's a part that feels it when something's off, when words and behavior don't match, when power and integrity seem to separate, when something feels off. The question isn't whether you've got this part. The question is, who's leading it? Because unregulated truth burns bridges, but regulated truth builds trust, authority, and leadership. The truth teller isn't here to be right. It's here to protect coherence. And when it's led, it doesn't destroy rooms. It steadies them. That's what this part became for me. Not a weapon, a coherence detector. Led, chosen, and directed. And if you can learn to lead yours, you don't lose your fire. You gain authority. So, that's the truth teller. And like you, there's no one version of me. I'm a collection of parts. And together, these parts make the John Trager Show. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode when you meet the Explorer.